I'm very happy that finally we can do the concert in memory of Igor Bezrodny. I want to thank all the musicians who are playing at that concert. There are students who were studying, former students of Igor Bezrodny. There are musicians who have played with him in orchestras when he was conducting. There is also a conductor, Jorma Panola, who was conducting concerts when Igor was playing as a soloist. So very many people are involved, and I want to thank them all, especially former rectors Tuomas Hapanen and Erkki Rautio, who were ruling the whole Sibelius Academy when Igor was teaching as a professor in Sibelius Academy. It's a pity that many people from abroad cannot join us, people who were in the program a year ago when we began that process. But still, I'm happy that it is now anyway played, and the memory of Igor Bezrodny lives. Thank you.
Already from an early age, from my very childhood, I was surrounded by stories of my father meeting Sibelius, Disney, Shostakovich, Stravinsky. It was quite extraordinary, and to be surrounded by that in your childhood is amazing. And therefore I somehow feel a personal connection, for example, to Sibelius. I grew up with it, really, with the actual personal connection to it. Therefore, it was a very special life. I don't know what I did in my past life to do, what I did right to have this possibility to be born into this kind of family. And my father was always an exemplary role to me throughout my life.
It was a nice time. He was a very pleasant guy, remarkable musician, violinist, chamber music, and also symphonic music. We played quite often with Finland's orchestras, mostly Bach and Mozart. What I remember, he was very pleasant also for musicians. And we had many stories, and he told many stories about musicians, Russian history, and special politics persons. He had many fun stories, really, at that time.
As I was very young violinist girl, and we went to participate in one summer music course, and Igor Bezrodny came to play a recital there, and I think I was 6 years, at the most 7, and I was sitting there and watching the whole recital through, admiring him. And then somebody asked me, "Berit, how did you like this concert?" I just said, "I want to become Igor." And I just think about this with a smile, because you know how far from becoming Igor I became. But when you reach the utmost, when you reach so far, like really high, then it can help you to get somewhere.
I studied with Igor in the 90s. We studied the year 90. That was a couple of months before the Sibelius competition. And then we continued our cooperation for a couple of years. Actually, I don't remember exactly. Maybe it was 3 or 4 years. And I was already working at the Helsinki Philharmonic Orchestra as a concertmaster, but I still went to these lessons. Well, he was simply a very nice teacher, a very warm person. The atmosphere at the lessons was always very warm, and there was no haste, or it was just simply very nice. I enjoyed it a lot. Well, it's very obvious that a person like him gives an impact which carries on for decades.
My memories about Igor Bezrodny comes quite far. I studied still with Tatiana Pogocheva, and I saw in Jyväskylä masterclass when Igor was there with his piano trio, Moscow Trio. A few years later, I got the possibility to study with Igor, and I was playing Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, E minor. First movement, I started to play it with Tatiana, and when Igor saw and heard my playing, he was changing few fingerings and bowings. And after that, Tatiana never changed anything, those markings what Igor did it for me. And I remember Igor, he was very warm person, and we worked together. For example, I was his student, and I worked in Jyväskylä masterclass later, and he was very good teacher. And then later, it's very nice memory about the working together in Kuopio National Violin Competition. I was due member with Igor there, and it was a semi-final day, the second semi-final day, and after lunch break, I went to jury's meeting room, and 10 minutes before, I was only with Igor there. Igor asked me, "Where are the others?" And I answered, "They are sleeping in hotel." And then Igor gave this joke, "Oh, and alone, what a pity."
Tietysti minä ensi kertaa tutustuin häneen, kun hän tuli, soitin silloin orkesterissa ja hän oli solistina useitakin kertoja. Niin ne on tietysti jäänyt mieleen. Ja sitten hän opetti eri puolilla, esimerkiksi Jyväskylän kesässä ja näillä kursseilla, ja niitäkin sitten jonkun verran seurasin. Ja sitten hän, kun minä jäin eläkkeelle, niin hän tuli sitten siihen professoripirkaan minun jälkeeni. No kyllä se kuuluu hänen soitostaan, että kyllä hänen viulisminsa oli tietysti aivan huipputasoa ja hänellä oli hyvin semmoinen terve musiikkikäsitys. Hän ei yrittänyt mitään semmoisia konsteja, joilla hurmataan yleisöä. Hän soitti musiikkia. Joo. Se oli hänelle, hän oli siis semmoinen täysiverinen muusikko. Joo. Kyllähän hänhän toimi myöskin Turussa, jossa minäkin silloin asuin. Siellä kapellimestarina ja kyllähän me olimme yhteistoiminnassa aika pitkäänkin ja hyviä ystäviä. Että hänessä yhdistyi myöskin tämä arvokas ominaisuus, että osaa soittaa viulua, mutta osaa myöskin ymmärtää musiikkia.
When I was 10 years old, Igor Bezrodny became chief conductor of the Turku Philharmonic Orchestra. My father played in the orchestra, and we had our regular seats every week. We sat in the same place. And of course, also after the concerts, we used to go backstage. And if we dared, we asked for autographs. And I do remember how friendly Igor was and how nice it was to speak to him when he had started working in Turku.